Hello, I'm BrigantiaBlackbird of BlackbirdsBrew. Happy Tuesday. Gang, we have things to discuss. So, while the country is in the midst of a nasty recession, with the prospect of a possible depression, with ongoing inflation that is ruining people's finances, and the FBI has decided that raiding the home of a former president under a pretext that's dubious at best is a good idea, and with the union of the corporate media, big tech, and authoritarian political powers, which is a fascistic union by definition, and they are actively tyrannizing over the American people. And we have cultural Marxism run amok, which is destroying institutions and relationships. And according to recent polls, 8 out of 10 Americans believe we have a two-tier justice system. And more people than ever believe that a civil war is increasingly likely. And we have the government trying to disarm the citizens. And there's a possible brewing conflict with China and Russia. And in the midst of all of this, for some inescapable, odd reason, Congress and the senile Biden administration thought it was a brilliant idea to expand the IRS, hire 87,000 new agents who will be armed and who are required to be prepared to use deadly force. Lovely. Magnificent. Wonderful. What could possibly go wrong? How could arming the tax collectors and threatening a financially tapped public with audits possibly be perceived as the government threatening its citizens? Now, if you and I were to sit down and write out a plan to destabilize a country and end the republic, what would we change or do differently? I mean, what would we alter about this ongoing plan, especially if we didn't care just how obvious it was? What other steps could we possibly take? Because it seems like pretty much all the bases are getting covered. Now, it's one thing for us to view politicians and other elites with suspicion. That's nothing new, and honestly, that's a pretty healthy impulse in any society. But it's very, very different when those powers that be show through their actions that they actually hate the people and they are targeting them so they can mooch off of their money, and that they are very willing to conduct lawfare against their antagonists. The colonies rebelled against Great Britain over taxes, and the United States was founded by a nation of rebels, by those who had a reverence for self-determination and believed that there is such a thing as justifiable rebellion against overbearing and arbitrary authority. That is American DNA. It's why the Constitution is structured the way that it is, why the Bill of Rights was and is of such great importance, and why there's an ongoing effort to hold a convention of the states in hopes of proposing amendments that will limit federal power and restore more power to the states and to the people. Now, it has been said properly that being an American is an idea. I believe that to be true, because being an American is as much about philosophy as it is for a love for this particular land. Never has being an American involved love for the government. If anything, contempt and suspicion of the government is a form of patriotism. But of course, I think it's pretty clear now that the powers that be don't want citizens. Far too pesky. Citizens understand that it is the citizens who are in charge, and that the government's power are subordinate to constitutional boundaries and the will of the people. No, indeed, the elites want subjects, peasants who do what they're told without complaint and who know their place. And just as a point of interest, since we're building a new aristocracy here, the last time feudalism was practiced, taxes were also a rather hateful burden on the people, and they were brutalized if they didn't comply. And the people were viewed as being beneath the ruling class. Different time periods, very similar behaviors. Now, a lot of people who comment on current events like to really hone in on the details, and they don't necessarily take the further steps of seeing how certain events are interrelated or they're the products of the same toxic environment or really bad ideology. And there's some virtue in doing that. But can we take a moment to zoom out, look at the big picture, and come to grips just how serious the current situation is? Because it isn't just one single thing going wrong. It's a lot of things going wrong all at the same time, being promulgated by the same kind of awful people. Now, I don't bring this up in order to black pill anyone, because this isn't the time to get scared, panic, lash out emotionally, or just conclude that we're doomed and do nothing. What it is time for is to assume the mantle of responsibility that every citizen should carry on their shoulders. Whether you are a first generation American, or your ancestors immigrated here before this even became an independent nation. Remember the roots of what this country actually is. Remember why we're here to start with. Remember who your ancestors were and the love they must have had not only for this land when they came here, but for their own homelands and their own people. Remember that if they were in our shoes, they'd be getting active to address the situation, and they would be making use of all the tools we have at our disposal. Our country was formed in the first place because the people asserted their will to exist. And I'm not even talking about the War of Revolution itself. I mean, yes, that was a part of it, but actually becoming a nation, that occurred because the people talked to each other. It was the people who were making decisions, and it was the people who negotiated a framework under which they were actually willing to live. It was through that common consent. Now, in order to avoid the worst outcome for our nation, massive reform is required. So don't wait on anyone who's currently in office to sort things out. Don't wait for a savior. The actions of politicians and those willing to go into that field have already proven who and what they are. Ultimately, they are not the ones who matter. It is we, the people, who actually count. And it is time we stood up, worked for the needed reforms, got better people into office before time runs out on us. Because believe you me, we are running out of time to find an exit ramp off of this insane road that we are on. But we do not have to become the victim of other people's nefarious intentions. We still have time to seize control if we have the will to do it. So if you agree with anything that I've happened to say in this video, please spread it around. Let's start having this conversation amongst the citizens. Let's actually start consulting ourselves about what we want to do instead of just waiting to be imposed upon by, just these overbearing tyrants that we have in government right now. Let's not let them dictate terms. Let's start presenting them some terms of our own and saying, look, we are taking the following legal actions in order to address it. Let's start showing people that there's hope. Let's start showing people that they are not helpless. Let's lead by example, and let's wake up the last people who are willing to stop being fence setters, who are willing to not just wait and see who ends up on top. Let's wake up the rest of the people who are actually willing to do something, and let's actually get something done. It is within our power. We don't have to be victims. So, as I said, please spread this around. Let me know what you think in the comments, or come see us on Gilded. Our server there is called BlackbirdsBrew. There's a link to join us in the description box below. You're very welcome. I would love to hear more conversation from solution-oriented people who are willing to get active and make their voices heard. I think there's a lot we can accomplish together if we just summon the will to do it. But that'll do it for this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.